Good morning. Today is Monday, the second day of Nisan. And today is the yard site of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He passed away in 1920. And one of the famous things we said about the Rebbe Rashab, he was considered the Rambam of Hasidus. He took the Hasidus, all the Hasidus teachings that we have today is thanks to the Rambam, to the Rebbe Rashab, just like the Rambam, the Maimonides took the Torah and put it down in a way that everyone can understand all of the laws of the Torah. The Rebbe Rashab also took the Hasidus and he explained it in a way that people can appreciate and understand it deeply. Is the length of Hasidic discourse that the Rebbe Rashab, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Cohen, he issued. And before he passed away, he said, "I go to heaven, but I leave you my writings." That means the teachings, the studying that we do today, and every day, the Hasidus, we continue the legacy, we continue the life of the Rebbe Rashab, and we continue to live. So, today, in the Tanya, we begin chapter 38, a new chapter, and the Alter Rebbe takes a shift at what we discussed until now. For the last 3 chapters, the Alter Rebbe explained the importance of the mitzvahs that involve action, physical action. And he explained how the action is what is necessary to purify this world. And that's why everything, what Hashem commanded us to do mitzvahs with physical things, like you take a physical object and you make it holy, and you make a parchment, and you write a Sefer Torah, and you write a mezuzah. All of this physical action, we explained, is important, and it is crucial in order to purify this world, because every aspect of the world needs to be purified. Today, Alter Rebbe takes the next step to explain how it is also important to have the intent of the mitzvah, not just the action of the mitzvah, but also the intent of the mitzvah. And he begins the chapter by explaining, based on what we explained in the last 3 chapters about the importance of action, we can understand why there are certain mitzvahs, like saying the Shema and praying and saying the grace after the meal, saying the prayer. We have to verbalize them. It's not enough if we read inside and we think the words, but we actually need to verbalize. Why? Because when you verbalize it, you're using action and you're using the vivifying soul, the soul that gives us energy to bring life to the physical object. It elevates us. It elevates the vivifying soul and every action that is involved. So let's begin. Let's look inside. We'll see how the Alter Rebbe says this. V'hinei, says the Alter Rebbe, Im kol anichtav le'eil. Now, in the light of everything that is being said above, the importance of action, Yuvan Heitev Psak Halacha Ho Arucha B'Talmud Poskim, we will well understand the ruling, the halachic ruling that is set in the Talmud and the Poskim, the codes, the codes of Jewish law, the Hiro Lav Kedibur Dame. The statement that says that meditation is not valid in lieu of verbal articulation. Then he brings an example. Ve'im kara kriyas shema b'machshavtoi u'beliboi levad. Now, if you recite the Shema, we know we have a mitzvah every single day to say the Shema, as we always do before we start the Shir in the morning. There's also a mitzvah to say the Shema at night. The mitzvah of saying the Shema is actually verbalizing and saying it. But if you read the Shema in your mind and in your heart, b'kol koyach kavanasai, and you used every, with all the power that you have of intent, lo yatsa yadeicha vasei. You do it with all the concentration. You have not fulfilled the obligation of saying the Shema, v'tzorich lachzor v'likris, and you must repeat it. You must repeat it and then say it again. Why? So we'll soon explain. Again, v'chein, in another example, he says, b'birkas hamazon de'oraisa. Similarly, also, when it comes to the blessing after the meal, which is ordained in the Torah. Now, while in the first mitzvah, this already mentioned, the mitzvah of saying the Shema, the Torah says clearly, v'dibarta bam, you should say it, you should speak it. So the Torah says clearly about the mitzvah that you have to say. But when it comes to saying the blessing, to thank God for the food, yes, it is a biblical commandment. It says, ve'achalta ve'savata ve'rachta, when you eat and you're satiated, then you should thank God. But it doesn't say clearly there that you have to say it, they have to verbalize it. You could thank God in your mind also. And yet the law is that it's not true. That is, yet you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of saying the birkat hamazon, the grace after the meal, if you only do it in your mind. You have to actually verbalize it. So that's the next thing. And now the Alter Rebbe brings a third example. Ubish'a brachas derabanan, even in the blessings that are not biblical, but they are rabbinical. Like the blessing we say before the meal. Saying the blessing after the meal, that is a biblical obligation. Saying the bracha before we eat, that is a rabbinical obligation. Some people think the other way around. You always know before you eat, you make a bracha. When it comes after the meal, people forget that there is actually a biblical obligation to say the blessing after you finish eating. So this too, even the rabbinical obligation, which is saying the blessings before we eat, or other blessings, like for blessing for the mitzvahs, before you put on tefillin, before you light the Shabbos candles, you say a bracha. Those are rabbinical mitzvahs, to say the bracha, but you have to verbalize it. And the same thing with tefillah. And also when it comes to prayer. When you pray, also, there's a mitzvah to pray. The biblical mitzvah is when you need something, you ask Hashem. You ask God to recognize that everything that you have comes from God. And don't worry about overburdening God, like some people tell me, tell them, pray to God for parnasa. Says, no, I'm going to pray for the important things. Well, it is a mitzvah. When you need something, it is a mitzvah. Then you recognize that there is Hashem, that everything comes from God. So the prayer, when you pray, you have to verbalize it. Now, on the other end, what if someone said the prayer and said the brachas, and you did not have in mind, you didn't think what you were saying? Sometimes you say it and your mind is somewhere else. Then the law is that he's actually fulfilling the mitzvah. He's fulfilling the mitzvah. It's not the ideal way to do it, but you fulfill the obligation. Post facto, you fulfill the obligation. He doesn't need to repeat them. So in other words, what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, we see that the actual verbalization is very, very important. And it's not because God told us to say it. Because even things that Hashem didn't say clearly to say, it is also important to say. We see that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah if you didn't say it. And on the other hand, if this is something you can do both with thinking and verbalizing, if you think alone and you don't verbalize, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. If you verbalize it and you didn't think, you didn't meditate, you didn't concentrate, you still fulfill the mitzvah. With exception for the first verse of Shema and the first blessing of Shmoneh Esrei. There, if you said it and without concentrating, you do have to repeat it. That's what it says here. Levad mipasuk rishon shel kriya Shema ubracha rishona shel tefillah Shmoneh Esrei. This is except for the first verse of the Shema and the first blessing in the Shmoneh Esrei. In the Amidah, the 18 blessings that we say in the Amidah, the standing prayer that we say 3 times a day, the first blessing, you must concentrate, you must understand what you're saying. Ukedeise bereish perek the brachos, ad kan mitzvahs kavana, mikan ve'elach mitzvahs kriya. It is written in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. It says until the end of the first verse of Shema, this is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is one of concentration. And from here on, the mitzvah consists of recitation. The first part of the Shema, you must concentrate. And after this, it's enough if you just recite. So the question is, again, Alter Rebbe says here, it is based on what we explained in the last 3 chapters, the importance of mitzvahs of action. Why do we need mitzvahs of action? Because we are here in this world to purify the physical world and every part of the world. And therefore, it is important to verbalize those things. The prayer and the Birkas Hamazon, the blessing and the Shema. And it says V'hainu, and this is because Mishum sha'neshama eina tzricha tikun le'atzma b'mitzvahs. Because the soul does not need to perfect itself through mitzvahs. The soul is perfect. Neshama, as we say every morning, Neshama shenasata b'tahiri, the Neshama that God gave us is pure. Nothing can affect the Neshama. The Neshama is perfect. The Neshama comes down here to this world to perfect our vital soul, to perfect our body. Rather, the goal of the mitzvahs is to draw down godly light to perfect the vital soul and the body. And it can only do it while being alive with a soul in a body in this physical world and doing God's mitzvahs. Alidei, and how does it do it? Alidei oisi oisadibu she'anefesh medaberes behei moitzoi sapeh. This is accomplished by means of the letters of speech, which the soul utters by means of the 5 organs of verbal articulation. The mouth, there is the tongue, there is the throat, there is the teeth. There's the 5 different ways that you utter the words. V'chein b'mitzvahs ma'asiyos, and so too with mitzvahs of action. She'anefesh oisa b'sha'ar evrei haguf, that the soul does with the rest, with the other organs of the body. Okay, so until now we understand why it is important to actually verbalize. Nevertheless, and here the Alter Rebbe shifts to the next level of understanding the importance not only of the action, not only of the verbalizing, but also there is important the intent And this, the Alter Rebbe begins today and is going to explain in the next few lessons. Yet nevertheless, our sages tell us, Tefillah oy she'ar bracha b'loy kavana, and keguf b'loy neshama. If you have a prayer or any other blessing that is said without kavana, without the concentration, it is like you have a body without a soul. We just learned that if you say the Shema, at least not the first verse, but the other verses, the first verse, you must have the concentration. But if you say the other prayers and you didn't have intention, it's okay, you're fulfilling the mitzvah. Says Alter Rebbe, yes, you are fulfilling the mitzvah, but yet our sages tell us that it is done as if you have a body without a soul. What does that mean? The fact that our sages use the example, the metaphor of a body and a soul, that means that we need to analyze it and to understand what is a body and a soul, and thereby we will understand what this means. That prayer without intent is like a body without a soul. Pirush. So, it says, this means as follows. Ki kemoi shekol habruim sheba'olam hazeh, sheyesh lehem guf u'neshama. Just as all the creation of this world possessing a body and a soul, because every creation has a body and a soul, not just physical human beings or animals. Every creation has a body and a soul. You have the body of human, obviously. You have the soul. Same thing with animal. This we all understand. We don't need to explain. But you have also body and soul in a tree. You have the body of the tree, and you have the soul of the tree, the growth of the tree, the taste of the tree, the smell of the fruits, and so on and so forth. But even inanimate object, like a rock, you have the body of the rock, and you have the soul of the rock. What is the soul of the rock? First of all, the very fact that it exists, that keeps it existing. You have also different rocks that have different qualities to them. You have diamonds, and you have flintstones, and you have all other kinds of types of objects. So he says, the Alter Rebbe, that just like all the creatures in this world that have a body and a soul, meaning the nefesh, the soul of every living being, and the ruach, spirit of all flesh, and the soul of all, the breath of all those of life. The life is in nostrils. From among all living creatures. And God animates them all, creating them from something from nothing constantly, with the light and the chayus, the energy that Hashem brings in them. And that is shegam aguf achumri, that even the physical body, the material body, vafilu avonim ve'ofor adoime mamash, and even the very simple stones and earth that is inanimate, yesh by oyer v'chayosim and isbarich. This also has a light and vitality from God. Blessed be He. And what is its life? That it should not go back to, it should not revert to its not and nothingness as it was before it was created. So the life of the rock is the energy that Hashem gives it to exist. But nevertheless, ein erech v'dimyon klal bein bchinas oyer v'chayus ameir beguf legabe bchinas oyer v'chayus ameir b'neshama shehi nefesh kol chai. you cannot compare the level of the light and the energy that shines in the body to the level of light and life sustenance, life force that shines in the soul, which is the soul of the living thing. What does that mean? So in this world, there is the life that we receive from Hashem. There is in one aspect, everything is equal. All types of creatures and all types of levels of the different categories of inanimate object, vegetations, or any other thing, they're all equal in the fact that God is there in a concealed way. In everything, God is concealed. Even in the most spiritual element of this world, God is still concealed. But there is a difference in the way Hashem brings down the light in either a concentrated way or in a less concentrated way. What do I mean? There is concealment of God, and there is also the level of Hashem's presence in every creature. There is certainly more. Where do we have more revelation of godliness? Is it in a rock or in a tree? Obviously, in a tree, there is more a revelation when the fact that you see more life, you see more than the fact that it grows and it produces fruits or whatever. And the same thing is in every creature. And you go on and on and on with the more spiritual elements of this creation. You have more and more revelation. This is comparing the body and the soul. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to continue to explain tomorrow, that the difference between the prayer without the kavanah, the praying without the intent, is like having the body without the soul. The soul is more of godliness. So basically what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, that regardless to what we explained until now, the last 3 chapters, that it is necessary to have the actual mitzvahs, the physical mitzvahs, whether you understand it or not, whether you have the concentration or not, because this is where you reach to the very bottom and you elevate the bottom to Hashem. But in the same time, it is important to know that there is also the form, the way, and the type and level of connecting with God is not the same when you do it without intent or when you do it with concentration. When you do it with concentration, you're introducing the soul into it. And your connection with God becomes a deeper connection. This will continue to explain in the next few lessons. Thank you for joining today, and please join us again tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. And also make sure to share this with everyone else that you know. And any questions, we'll take now questions.